Too many Brandons around, so it's, so it works one way or the other. So, I've never met a bad Brandon. So
No.
it's been good company. Yeah, well, I'll probably swing in there one of these days this week, because, the thing I was thinking about presenting that, we're going to hold off on a little bit, because we're working on a few things, but I wanted to I know Brandon had been working on that too, so I wanted to kind of get you up to speed.
All right, folks, we're just gearing up on our end here. Just want to check quickly who the 757-4550 is. Should be able to talk here in just a second. You just let us know who you are, 757-4550.
That's all you got.
It's okay. That's all right. I'd rather. I'm actually. I'm back in town on Friday. So I don't know if you might be.
Coming back in town.
Well,
we can do it next
I
week.
had the week off, and I haven't seen my mom for a long time with COVID, so she needs somebody to clean the gutters and those kinds of things. So I'm going to make a trip this week to do that. But
Okay, well, yeah.
there was not a quorum, but a general.
Could you let us know who you So bear with us again.
Okay, thanks.
Did you get that canceled?
And how about the 212-621-044?
Special
Yeah. And then the 740.
I was CC'd on the original one, it's not the cancellation.
That's what happens. Send Mike and Lee.
All right, good evening, everybody. This is the time and the place for the meeting of the Grand Forks Growth Fund Committee. We will start with roll call.
Claire? Was she coming? Was she going to be on?
Here.
Dodler? Okay,
Sorry, I'm on my phone, so it's a little all over the place.
okay. Holt,
Here?
Weber, Weigel, Wolf.
Here. All right, we have a quorum. I'd like to start off by welcoming Mayor Bochensky, Councilman Kwame, and Mr. Gosted. Welcome, looking forward to working with all of you. We have a jam-packed agenda today, so we'll get right into it. First item on the agenda is the minutes from May 18th, 2020. Any corrections or comments on the minutes? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Second. It's been moved and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, FlexPace loan request, Northern Tier Seed. Mr. Bombach or Meredith, who's going to handle this?
I'll just introduce real quickly. Brandon Bombach from the EDC is going to kind of shepherd both of these two FlexPace loans through. We do have guests attending both in person and via Zoom to be available for questions or just speak to the committee. So Brandon.
Thank you. Mr. Bombach.
Thank you, Meredith, members of the committee. I get to present on Northern Tier Seed once again, a growing company just out of Thompson, North Dakota that continues to do what they do very well. So they're back here. Just one quick note too, I believe that's a PACE request. Just to note that, we'll make sure we get that correct, not FlexPace. But before I jump into the financial description of what Northern Tier Seed does, we are joined here by the principal of the company, Bill Weber. Also Beth Hughes is here with the company. And then I understand understand Randy Knutsvig, their lenders, on the call in case there are any questions for him. But otherwise, I welcome Bill up just to give us a little history about the company, and I'll come back for the financials.
Great, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm back again. I'm Bill Weber. I'm one of the owners of Northern Tier Seed. Paul Spruill is our other partner. We started their business in 2001. We condition soybean seed and wheat seed. We work for Monsanto or Bayer Monsanto, Pioneer, Syngenta, CHS, Legend Seed, and Peterson Genetics, all with soybean seeds. We place production for the companies throughout the state of North Dakota, Minnesota. We clean about 1.1 million bushels of soybeans a year. And we were here, I think, 2 years ago. We made a major expansion, and it's principally what we're doing now is adding more bins, more capacity. Our business warrants it. We got people that want it. And what we're planning on doing is putting in 20 more bins. And we're going to also put new conveyors and catwalks over the top of it. We're putting another load out there so we can speed up our loading capacity. And the total project is about 1.6 million we're planning on spending. And that's going to increase our capacity. We'll have total storage there of over 750,000 bushels of bulk storage. And I think our first loan we got was in 2013, and I just want to thank you for all the help that you have done. And it's been a real treat working with you fellows. And I just want to thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bombach.
Mr. Hall, thank you, Bill, for those remarks. Just to put a note on that, the first deal was in 2013. They've just repaid that off. It's been their fifth. This will be their fifth expansion now, and so they keep doing something right, that's for sure. This total investment, as Bill just said, just under 1.6 million. This will be financed through First State Bank at 4.3%, so this request would help buy it down to 1%. This is a total loan from you of $61,000, just over $61,000, and that leverages a Bank of North Dakota contribution of $184,000. Loan to value on this is outstanding at 53%. It's secured on a second mortgage on the property and a full UCC filing on all the equipment. And there's personal guarantees from both Bill and Paul Spruill, who we mentioned as co-owners. So with that, I entertain a motion that this go before the JDA for consideration next Monday.
Thank you. Questions from committee members for Mr. Bombach? Mr. Wolf?
Yes, and thanks for being here, Bill. Thanks for being here 5 times. We like it when you come here. So maybe just a question on, I know that in the write-up here, this complies with our Meredith, our guidelines, our policies, procedures, so thank you for putting that in there. Bill, any comments on, obviously you guys have been successful as you look forward here, your outlook for the rest of 2020, 2021? It's a comment we ask about everybody in this world, but what's your outlook for the rest of this year and even into next year?
Well, our past year...
Bill, can you come on? Sorry, Bill. People on television want to hear you.
Okay.
And see you.
See you.
Well, you know, as we know, ag isn't too good right now. But our this past season, we were pretty much in line of what we did the previous year. And of the projection of the acres that we have placed for the different companies, for what they're projecting for next year, we should be about right on track. And if soybeans or if ag gets better, our business is going to get better. Because the 1 year, you know, we did clean 1.6 million. That was back in, I think, about 13 or 14 when ag was good. So, but visiting with the companies, Bayer, Monsanto, and Pioneer companies, you know, they're all projection. Next year, they figure there's going to be more soybeans planted. And this year, our Our conditioning would have been up, but it was a late spring, wet, and there was a lot of corn that wasn't harvested the previous year, so a lot of those acres never got planted this year, and a lot of those acres would have been soybeans. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions from committee members? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I will make a motion to proceed.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been motioned and seconded, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, FlexPace loan request, Oxford Brewing Company. Ms. Richards.
Again, this is not a good customer like our previous customer, but a new customer, Oxford Brewing. Again, we don't have any representatives. Sorry, I knew I'd do that. No representatives from the company in person, but we do have people joining via Zoom or over the phone. And so again, Brandon?
Yes, thank you, Meredith. It's an exciting new project here. It'll be the third brewery in Grand Forks. We've been able to support through the JDA two previous breweries, both Rhombus Guys and Half Brothers, on the manufacturing of the beer. And so this is a very similar request as Oxford Brewing looks to establish. Meredith mentioned a couple of folks on the phone. We have Mike Opp, who's principal with the company, and then also lenders Angie Bauman and Chris Johnson from Choice Financial, both available. Do we have Mike able to come in? I asked that maybe he introduce himself and what he's working on.
I'm here, Brandon.
Perfect. Mike, would you mind telling us just a little bit about this opportunity?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. It's something that, first of all, I'm just really excited about bringing this new experience to our neighborhood over here on the north end. If some of you might be familiar, 2009 13th Avenue North, right by Judy's Tavern in Oxford Realty, where I work, and we've had this little outbuilding. It's a beautiful location right on North 20th, and the building, has been kind of an eyesore until recently. We've been slowly fixing it up, and we feel like this brewery is going to be a great use for the property. It was a Tasty Freeze many years ago, and for the longest time has basically just been a vacant storage shed. And the location is just too good for that. And we look forward. We got some good partners that looking forward to making a high quality beer for Grand Forks and a new beer for North Dakota.
Thank you, Mike. I'll jump into the financial description here, and then, of course, there'll be any questions. So as they establish the brewing, it's important to note that they're working through two distributors, and the majority, the lion's share of that 60% of what's produced would be sent out to a distributor located in Dickinson. So the vision is further beyond this market, and primarily so. Total investment's $190,000, with $142,000 being financed by Choice. And so this loan request for just over $6,000 would help buy down the interest from 4.5% to 1%. That leverages just over $11,000 from the Bank of North Dakota. That loan to value is right in line at 78%. There's primarily equipment in this project, and so it's covered by UCC filing on all that equipment and a personal guarantee from Mike Opp. And we've taken through that, a look at this personal financial statement, sufficiently liquid, of course, to handle anything there. So again, we have Mike you just heard from, but also Angie Bauman on the phone, Chris Johnson from the bank, in case there's any questions on the lending side. Otherwise, the motion would be the same as the last project, to carry it forward to the JDA next Monday.
Thank you. Questions, comments from committee members?
Mr. Holth?
Yes, Mr. Weigel.
Sorry, I was having some technology issues, but I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
say prior to that, I need to make a motion to recuse myself due to potential conflicts of interest on this one.
I'll make that motion as well.
Okay.
I'll second both motions.
Okay, so we're going to take the recusal here first. To recuse Mr. Wolf, that has been moved and seconded. I imagine there's no further discussion on that. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Mr. Wolf is officially recused. Okay, now we have a motion on the floor to approve the project. Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Further discussion. I have a question. Mike, if you could, I know you mentioned in the application that your primary marketing area is going to be western North Dakota. I assume that doesn't mean that I assume it means we're still going to be able to get the product here locally, right? And are you looking into Minnesota or any other markets, or is that we're just kicking off in western North Dakota, or what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah. No, we want to partner up with McKinnon as well. And we'd like to sell right on site. The problem is the site is so small. We don't, we're going to be able to brew 10 barrels approximately weekly. And we think that's probably too much. There's only going to be room for a few seats in the brewery, if any,
Sure.
and a few outside. So selling on site is well, we'd like to, and we hope people come to our neighborhood and drink at the brewery and around the brewery. We really are going to have to reach out, and I shouldn't name names on who we're partnering with, I guess, but we have local beer distributors that we've been talking with.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions from committee members? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, next on the agenda, lease renewal request, Kitsona Corporate Center 2. Ms. Richards.
Thank you. You may recall Kitsona appeared before this group just about a year ago. That was the point at which their original lease on this space expired, and as well as a renewal, they were requesting some rent concessions due to both some kind of business-wide concerns as well as requesting some modifications due to anticipated downturn in their business due to the Demers construction. In any case, at that point last year, a one-year extension was approved, and that expires at the end of this month. As you know, we are anticipating selling Corporate Center 2 in the relatively near future, and so we have built into these leases some pretty short-term extensions to kind of enable that opt-out clause when the sale should occur. So in this case, Kitsona has requested a 6-month extension of their modified lease. So they are paying approximately $2,000 a month in rent, deferring the balance of about $2,900, and continuing to accrue that deferred rent at 0 interest. So that is the request, to continue that arrangement through the end of this year. I believe Tessa Heine, one of the principals, is on the line if you have questions. No real presentation, just a request to extend the existing modification for 6 more months. And I do want to make note that since that modification has been approved, they have stayed current on that $2,000 a month payment. So they are current. While they have a large accrued balance, they are current.
Okay. Thank you. Comments or questions?
Hello, this is Brett Weber. I've joined the meeting. I'll move approval.
Hello, Mr. Weber. Welcome. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I would second.
Okay, second from Ms. Doppler. Further discussion?
Mr. Holt, I do have a question for you.
Please.
Or maybe Ms. Richards, the question is for, but when we sell that building or we put that building up for sale, what happens when that amount of money is still owed to the city? Does that just, that debt fall onto the new owner, or do we get paid for it, or how does that work?
when the last extension was approved, it was kind of agreed that how that deferral would be either repaid or amortized over a lease extension was just kind of deferred. So I don't have a solid answer for you. It would not be necessarily assumed by the new buyer. It would be at the time that the lease ends, we would be negotiating with Kitsona on how that would be repaid.
Thank you.
And Ms. Richards, have there been any of those discussions? So it's, since the last year, the payments have been made, there's the deferral has increased, which we expected. Have there been any of those conversations about that balance to this point, or is that something that will be addressed later? What's the plan?
The plan is just kind of extension by extension. So, you know, to put it colloquially, we're kicking the can down the road. And at this point, since they are current, the request was just to keep doing what we've been doing until we have a sale. I shouldn't say that would be the only circumstance, but, you know, with a 6-month at a time extension, that's kind of what we're expecting.
Ms. Richards,
Yes?
can you start having that discussion now over the next couple of months so that 6 months from now when it comes back for maybe another short-term lease or the building goes up for sale, whichever occurs first, that we have a plan in place that we're not kicking that can farther down the road?
Absolutely. I mean, we could make that a condition of any further renewals would, excuse me, only be approved upon, you know, some agreement on a repayment plan.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from committee members? Mr. Phelan.
Vice Chair Holt, I think we do have a new city attorney, Mr. Gostin, and we're quite pleased with that. Is that I think Dan should be part of the negotiations in setting up this renewed lease agreement with the anticipation that something's going to happen in the future, and it's good to have a new set of eyes too, working with Meredith moving forward. So
Agreed.
I'd request that too.
Agreed.
That's no problem.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Gosted. The only comment that I would make on it is I know that this committee is charged with managing largely dollars and cents and moving things forward to the JDA. I just want to make the comment that I think it's noteworthy that what Kitsona did when this community was shut down. And in terms of stepping in to fill a need, I don't think that can be overlooked. So I just wanted to make that comment on the record. Any other comments or questions from committee members or guests?
This is Tessa. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make the comment, well, thank you for the acknowledgement of what I had created during the pandemic, what is Feeding Forks. We ended up serving 25,000 meals while we were closed for about 3 months. And I just wanted to note that the past year I have taken over operations of Kitsona and am now the sole owner of the business and have been operating it myself for the past about 10 months.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, any further comments or questions? Hearing none, we have a motion that's been seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item on the agenda, lease cancellation request, Ann Love Boutique, Corporate Center 2. Ms. Richards.
Well, similar retail tenant, similar time frame, but in this case, rather than requesting an extension, Ann Love, Callie Schmidt, on behalf of Ann Love, has requested cancellation of their lease, and they are planning to now close the business. Their specific request is attached to your staff report. They have been unable to, much like Kitsona, they negotiated in advance of falling behind. They negotiated a reduced rent that was similar in that they would make a payment and defer the balance, but they have been unable to make any of those payments. So you can see that they're deferred rent total is now approximately $42,000, and they're requesting to just cancel the lease now rather than at the end of the year when their first opt-out clause takes effect per the existing lease. Again, this was kind of in recognition of the fact that the sale of this building was expected in that time frame, so those opt-out clauses were built in. They've also requested some consideration of the improvements that they've made in terms of reduction to what they owe. That would be, completely at the behest of you as decision makers to, consider that is in your decision making on whether or not to authorize cancellation, and then basically in terms of how much rent they would pay to cancel. I believe, Callie or Roman, are you on the call?
Yes, we're here.
If you would like to, I'm sure you could make a more compelling presentation than I can. Please go ahead.
Yeah, we just, with the construction downtown and this pandemic now, there's just absolutely no foot traffic. And with the new business trying to get its feet solid in this town, it's not going to happen for us at this time. So I guess we're just kind of looking at kind of an option to get out early, and also some kind of terms for the past due rent. We just kind of noted, if we kind of left it ready turnkey for another retail, it'd be, we put in over $40,000 of leasehold improvements. So just kind of take that into consideration, I guess.
Thank you. Comments or questions from committee members?
So I appreciate the Schmitz being available here today. So a couple things, maybe Ms. Richards, so if I understand, with the leases as they're structured, tenant improvements at the end of a lease, they would belong to who put them in, is that right?
No, they stay with the building.
Oh, okay, so I missed that. So they would stay with the building here anyway, so they're going to be, contractually, they're part of the building, okay. What about, what options have we explored? What's in front of us here today? There's two matters, as I understand it. There's what is owed at this point as well as terminating it. So what's owed at this point? What options have been discussed at this point?
The accrued or deferred rent is about $42,000. The rent to the end of the year would be another $20,000 on top of that. And then their request would be for consideration of $40,000 of tenant improvements. So you can kind of, in terms of an agreement, that's what we're looking for, some direction from you as a committee. Do you want to entertain any of that consideration in terms of reducing either the accrued debt or consideration of forgiving, for lack of a better term, the rent that would be owed through the end of the contract, but when they're not occupying the building?
Sure. At this point, do we have any, obviously it's fitted up, the building is set, do we have any interest? We've been contacted about anybody renting that space as is? No?
No. Our construction staff person did take a look and said that, the improvements are very high quality, and in fact, it could be a very nice turnkey operation for the right retail tenant. But of course, a different tenant, the improvements would just be something to be removed rather than something of value.
Sure. And final question that I would have is, do we have any history or precedence with something like this?
Not during my tenure here.
Okay.
Working on the growth fund. We've been pretty fortunate that, as you may recall, these retail spaces sat vacant for many years after the corporate center was constructed. But typically our tenants are pretty timely payers, so we haven't had to really deal with, evictions or circumstances like this. Before, the space that Ann Love occupies now was, the previous tenant was Sadie's Floral Boutique, and she did leave her lease early by a couple of months, and I think there was some small consideration given for some of the improvements that she left behind. In terms of, she was just given basically the ability to get out of her lease and not pay those last 2 months in exchange for leaving behind light fixtures or something of that nature. So that's a very slight precedent, but not too terribly relevant to this circumstance. There was no past due rent in that circumstance. It was just a request to offset basically rent that would be contractually obligated with improvements, and the committee agreed to that.
Other comments from committee members?
The committee has typically been pretty generous in, recognizing the struggle that our retail community has had, especially with construction and now with COVID. So, as we've said, the bottom line here is not turning a profit, but supporting our community and our tax base and our businesses. So I don't think, there's no staff recommendation on whether you should authorize forgiveness or the precedent that would set, but I think the committee has typically been pretty supportive of homegrown businesses and giving them consideration in the past.
Yeah, and I would say, just a comment on that, I'd be interested in Mr. Galsted's thoughts on this specifically, of what precedent we would be setting. If you have any comments on that with, since we've not done this to this extent in the past.
I think you're running down that path of others making the similar requests in the future. I do want to take a look at the lease. If those things are part of the building, there is some issues that come up that I've been thinking about scratching down some notes here as the discussion occurs. So it does beg the question is, who's next?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough spot for the committee, right? And we've, Mr. and Mrs. Schmidt, when you originally came in front of the committee, I remember commending you for being honest with us about the state of your business. That hasn't changed. It's a tough spot to be in. My thought is, in looking at this, was it's great to have a value on the tenant improvements and certainly appreciate that investment you made in the business. They only really have value if the next tenant comes in and uses all of them. But at the same token, we have a responsibility to the taxpayers here, but we're also sympathetic to the fact that businesses, it's been a tough go here. So I don't know. I would ask from Ms. Richards or Mr. Phelan about the time sensitivity of this, or what it would mean if we had to or requested tabling it. I was thinking that it would be nice to have a little more discussion on this and a little more time to think about it, and also hearing Mr. Gosted's comments just to make sure that we're doing our due diligence before we make a decision here. I would, certainly be willing to sort of timestamp where we're at with this discussion right now, so I don't want it to penalize the Schmidts. If we decide that we need another month to talk about this, that they just have another month of rent tacked on. So I think we would always make note of the fact that this is when this discussion started. But it just seems to me like we need a little more due diligence on this. That's where I'm kind of at right now.
To give some direction to staff, if you're of a mind to authorize the cancellation, subject to, more discussion with the tenants in terms of, I guess, a workout plan, for lack of a better term, what they would actually request in terms of, not just consideration, but if you were to, for instance, say that you don't want to forgive anything, how would they react to that? But maybe step through this, and yes, we agree to a cancellation. The terms of that cancellation, kind of to your point of, we're not going to expect you to stay till the end of the year, but what that termination would look like would be at a future meeting. And then we could certainly work with the Schmidts to come up with a more firm proposal, I guess, based on your willingness to consider some sort of forgiveness as opposed to a discussion of, no, you don't want to entertain it at all.
So Ms. Richards, are you suggesting that we, as a committee, would move to authorize the staff to continue to work on this with the Schmidts and with Mr. Gosted, and then come back with an updated suggestion, or is that, did I hear you
Correct, and then
correctly?
any indication about your leanings toward either well, any of the elements that you would care to comment on. The consideration, you think that's a good idea or not so much, or you would want to recapture all of the rent that's been accrued to date, but you would perhaps be willing to consider something less for the portion of the lease that's been canceled. Just some direction so that when we sit down with the Schmidts to come back with a more detailed proposal, we've got some feedback as to what your preference would be.
I think personally that's partially dependent on what Mr. Gosted says. It's also partially dependent on, the items, the tenant improvements that they made, about having some sense of the actual value of I know what they've told us. Do we have any proof of that's their value? What can stay regardless of tenant? What is specific to the type of tenant that goes in there? A little more detail on that would be helpful. For me. I don't personally have any desire to squeeze every penny out of the Schmidts. That's not where I'm at with this. Again, this is a tough spot to be in when we're talking about taxpayer dollars and being sympathetic to them as business owners as well.
I think, Vice Chair, you said it, if we could timestamp now, and so that we're not here 2 months, so that they know with some certainty where the clock stops with where they're in arrears. I think if we have a consensus on that, from the committee. I think the other thing that might be helpful as Mr. Gosted goes through the agreement, oftentimes a member of the committee, joins the negotiation with staff and with our attorney, and so that you can speak firsthand as a committee member that you work through some. So if somebody from the committee would be willing to be part of that, and you can be a voice back to this committee. And sometimes that's proven effective too, especially in these challenging circumstances, if somebody would be willing to be that outside voice from our circle that we work in here too, I think would be helpful.
Sure, that makes sense. Mr. Chair, do you have a recommendation on who that person should be, if you're still on the phone? I'd be happy to be a part of that if you would like a committee member, or
All right.
it can be somebody else too.
If I could recommend maybe Mr. Holt, you've been in the retail business and you've seen the ups and downs. I think you would have some firsthand experience in this neighborhood of being able to understand. So I think you would be a sympathetic voice and back to the committee if you'd be willing to do that.
Sure. Okay with the other committee members? Okay, so any other comments or questions from the committee? If not, I would entertain a motion from somebody to direct staff to proceed with negotiations and discussions on this with the Schmidts and with Mr. Gosted.
And come back at the next committee meeting with more detail.
I will make that recommendation.
Okay. Moved by Mr. Wolf. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by
Mr. Hole?
Yes.
Hi, Dana Sandy speaking. So I just want to understand, does that mean they're handing over the keys to the business tomorrow? Or today, or do they get to continue to operate up until we've finalized negotiations?
Well, I believe the business has been closed. Roman, do you want to address your intentions? I mean, you've requested cancellation as of basically immediately. Can you explain what that would mean in practical purposes?
I guess, I guess we would like to maybe, now that we know this is in motion, we probably are going to have a week or 2 week of a blowout sale to help get rid of some of the inventory. I guess we wanted to do that sooner, but with this COVID kind of lingering on, we haven't found a good time where we feel we'd get a good presence of anybody in there for a sale. So, you know, and I don't know, how long do you think this will take to?
I don't know if we know the answer to that. Mr. Sandy, I think, Mr. Gosted, correct me if I'm wrong here, but until we have official, I suppose, cancellation of the lease, they're entitled to the space, are they not?
If I'm reading the report, and that's all I've got in front of me, is that their opt-out isn't until December 31 of 2020. And unless they've exercised that opt-out, I don't know if they've done that at this point, that I've seen anyways. So.
Sure.
We have got a request to cancel. They haven't specifically asked to exercise their opt-out clause as of December 31st.
And I don't have any problem with them trying to get rid of their inventory while we're working to figure this out, I guess, so that's...
Mr. Hull?
Please.
Sorry. Again, I totally understand what you're saying and where you're going with the whole line of questions and comments. It all makes perfect sense to me. All I want is for them to understand that if they, saying that, we're setting the clock today and that they've notified us, yet we're going to continue to let them operate their business, it seems a little bit counterintuitive. I understand that they're in a predicament, and I also want them to be able to sell their inventory, but telling them that they're no longer on the hook for their rent for the rest of the month, for example, or for July, and then letting them operate, it does seem a little bit odd to me. So I was hoping that you could provide some clarity to that, either to me or to them.
Okay, so if we bring it back in 2 weeks, is that an okay time period? And I understand what you're saying, Mr. Sandy. I'm trying to wrap my head around this in real time.
So, Mr. Holt, thank you. And again, this is a very difficult situation, and I understand that. I don't have any answers right now. All I have is questions. So what I know is if we're going to start the clock today and say, okay, you don't owe us any rent, to me, that's you're forfeiting your obligations, or at least you're no longer having access to the facility.
Sure. So I guess...
Can we prorate a month? Certainly.
Well, what I was going to say is I think that they would be, until we've officially accepted a cancellation or an opt-out clause, they're on the hook for their rent. What I meant by timestamp today was just make a note that they brought this request forward today, and if we as a body drag our feet on it, that they're not punished for that. It doesn't. When I say timestamp today, it doesn't mean, okay, you're off the hook effective today. It's just making a note that this is when they brought the request forward, and we will work as quickly as we can to come up with a resolution. I just think we have some more diligence to do. Until we come up with that resolution, they're the leaseholders and are responsible for the terms of the lease. Is that?
Yes, very good. That makes perfect sense.
I'm glancing over at Mr. Gosted as I sort of play attorney up here, so.
Well, and they owe what they owe.
Yeah.
Unless the committee and then subsequently the JDA approves something different.
Sure.
I would, again, not seeing the lease, I would concur that my understanding of landlord-tenant obligation is until that lease is terminated, the rent is due and owing.
Right.
My only purpose for the question is I didn't want to give them a false understanding.
Sure.
So thank you for the clarification.
Yep. Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Sandy. Okay, I'm going to think back now. We had a motion and a second, right? Did we have a motion? Mr. Wolf, you moved to direct the staff. We had a second.
Oh, I believe Ms. Dockler seconded?
I did.
Okay. Any further comments? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We'll be, Mr. and Mrs. Schmidt will be chatting with you soon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, item number 7 on the agenda, LM lease renewal and employee canteen project proposal. Ms. Richards.
Third lease in a row.
Yeah.
In this case, it's both a lease renewal and a proposal for a minor construction project. As your staff report kind of walks you through, LM has had a place in the industrial park for over 20 years. They own their own facility at 1580 South 48th Street and lease approximately 128,000 square feet of what was formerly the Noah's Ark building that's owned by the JDA at 1550 South 48th Street. Boy, I don't remember if either of you were on the committee when that expansion was approved that was completed in 2018. In any case, at that point, at the end of the day, a $1.1 million expansion was approved and completed, and a 3-year lease started at that point. So March 2018, the project was completed and the clock started on a 3-year extension. That 3-year extension ends in March of next year. So we're trying to package both a renewal of the lease in with their request for the JDA to fund a fit-up of a canteen space in the former Amazon call center. Again, not quite sure if either of you were on the committee when they talked about expanding into the first floor and taking all of that first floor space as a kind of combination training facility and office conference space. We got pretty far down the road in terms of that project and took it through bidding, but the costs got too high and basically GELM decided not to go through with that project. So the request now is to take, instead of all of that first floor, approximately 25 to 30% of that space and convert it to a canteen for their employees. As the staff report says, the LM feels this is pretty important to their ability to retain and attract workers, and especially in today's environment, their staff are having to eat in their cars. So they consider this an important project for the longevity of their workforce. Like a lot of other companies, LM has got some cash flow issues due to their shutdown at that facility and otherwise. And so the proposal that has been worked out over the past few weeks with LM staff locally, city and ED staff working together, has been a combination of renewal and expansion project. And so the terms of that are kind of listed in your staff report. We would be looking at a 3-year extension that would commence when the current lease ends in March of 2021. According to the folks at LMGE Corporate is approving only 3-year extensions with an opt-out clause after 2 years. That's kind of a corporate policy now. They would ask, and we would support the JDA absorbing the cost of that conversion of the Amazon space to a canteen, which is estimated, including contingency, at about $175,000, so that would be a not-to-exceed amount. We would maintain the existing base rate and then apply that across the entire square footage that would be leased by LM, and then they would continue to amortize the cost of that $1.1 million fit up over the full 54 months. The way their lease is structured now, when it ends in March of next year, 36 of the 54-month amortization will have been paid. This would allow us to recoup the entire cost of that expansion. And then kind of in recognition of their cash flow issues, they've asked to have some rent deferred and forgiven. We've kind of packaged that into a deferral for 7 months, and then if they would agree to renew at the end of the 3 years, then 4 months of that would be forgiven, more or less a signing bonus. So we do have some folks from LM. I'm not quite sure who is available, but I would like to, I believe Jagdish Rao, their plant manager, is on the call, so I'd like to give him an opportunity to discuss the importance of this project from LM's point of view and some of the rationale behind the terms that have been requested.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I am Jagdish Rao, plant manager of NM Wind Power Grand Forks. Well, we have been here in business here in Grand Forks since 1999, around 20 years. We are employing approximately around 1,000 employees in our facility. The city of Grand Forks has been very, very helpful in supporting our business. Currently, we lease approximately 128,000 square feet of manufacturing space at 1550 South 48th Street. Here in this facility, we currently have a break room, which is part of the lease building. And we want to further improve our break room facility for the benefit of our employees. Hence, we are requesting city for supporting us in leasing an additional 5,800 square feet of space, and also the revised lease, which will help us in our business.
Thank you. Ms. Richards, anything else?
Key elements, we are not raising their rent. We are holding steady at that $4.90 a square foot base rent that they have been paying for quite some time. They are an excellent tenant in that they pay no CAM charges. They take care of all their own utility costs, snow removal. It's basically a turnkey operation for us in terms of landlords. And we definitely want to keep LM in the community. As the staff report notes, they employ a lot of people and have a very positive impact. That being said, we are offering them some concessions in that they're asking for free rent as kind of a deferral and then a forgiveness. We've agreed to kind of using that as a carrot for renewal, that the forgiveness only occurs if the lease is extended at the end of this 3-year period. If not, then all the fit-up costs plus the deferred rent would be basically a payment that they would have to make before they could vacate the building.
And Ms. Richards, what's the total dollar amount in the forgiveness that we're looking at? Do we know that? Or approximate?
About $210, not quite $210,000 would be 4 months of forgiveness. We do have,
thank you.
If you want to actually kind of look at the space layout that is being proposed, we've got a floor plan that shows.
Michelle, could you put up the computer? Thanks.
So that green area, well, Ryan, do you want to go ahead since you're standing there with the mouse?
Sure. So to the right is north, and on the backside of here is all the manufacturing space that's connected, the 128,000 that he had mentioned. The building that they own is just to the south here, and the green area highlighted here is the 5,800 that they'd be looking to add.
What is kind of difficult to see is that the green area takes all of the restroom facilities on that first floor. So it's been vacant since Amazon left it, and it's not like we have got a lot of people expressing interest in it, but to make that first floor usable to any tenant other than LM, we would have to add some bathroom facilities back in. So while it's very helpful to LM to have that for their staff, it does make the building less user-friendly for future tenants without some relatively extensive tenant improvements would have to be made to make that first floor leasable by someone other than LM.
And that's been looked at in terms of working with code, making sure this brown area would be where those bathrooms could go back in. So one of the things that was done was to make sure that if we were going to remove these, that there was a place that could work, and so that brown area would be the best spot for that, is what we're looking at. But we would wait to do those improvements as we wait for tenants to come in.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Is that okay?
Please, yeah, Mr. Kwame.
So if they were to leave after that 1 year, they're opt out, then they would owe the 200 plus thousand dollars. Is that correct?
Correct. Well, it's an opt-out after 2 years, but yes, all of the fit-up costs and any deferred forgiven rent would be due if they don't renew.
So we're effectively paying $200,000 to keep them in the full term, like the city, that's the incentive.
Well, not just the full term, but to renew.
To that point, maybe, so I'll get to the opt-out in a second, like Councilman Kwame, I just want to walk through the timeline. So what we're being looked at, asked, and again, I'm very thankful that LM is in our community and has been for a long time. Let me start there. But we're being asked to spend $175,000 to put into the facility. We're being asked to defer 7 months of rent starting in the fall. We'll be working on a 3-year extension during that time, right? I mean, we'll be working on, that'll be the understanding, is trying to get a 3-year lease with a 2-year opt-out. Then we'll sign the lease. As part of that, we'd be giving up 4 months, forgiving 4 months of payments, which you said is how much money?
About just shy of $210,000.
So we'd spend 175, we're going to give up 210.
If they renew.
If they renew, yes, if they renew, and then they would renew for 3 years, but they'd have the opt-out when?
After 2.
After 2.
Well, that's, and Jagdish, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's GE's current policy is a 3-year renewal with opt-out after 2. You know, 3 years from now, would that be different? Possibly.
Yeah.
But what we're saying today is that forgiveness would come only upon a minimum renewal of what we're asking for now, or better, I guess.
Yeah. So if we'd work towards a 3-year agreement, there's a 2-year opt-out. If they would exercise the 2-year opt-out, have we had conversations about recapturing that forgiveness?
Correct.
We
If
have.
they opt out after 2 years,
After 2 years, then there would be.
we would
Okay.
recapture all of the cost of the canteen
Okay.
fit-up, and
Okay.
there would be no forgiveness.
Okay, so that's helpful. Thank you. So during the end, we'd still be looking to charge the $490, same rent, however, more square footage.
Correct.
So the rent amount per month would be going up. And what would our payback be on that? How quickly would that, or what's?
Oh, boy, I haven't, I'll ask the number king here. Keith is punching numbers into his calculator.
Mr. Lund, we'll wait here.
I knew he would be doing that, so.
I think it referenced something about it be paid back with a 2%. I'm curious on, would we recover that investment during the term of the extended lease by the increased payment?
Oh. Well, we did have a,
Mr. Lund,
May I?
you may.
This is only, we're not going to do the expansion project until they sign a 3-year lease extension, and nothing is forgiven until they do another 3, right? This is a 6-year arrangement.
I want to clarify my understanding. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, if I may, just to clarify, this agreement, the expansion, as I understood it and how we have discussed it, would not occur unless LM Wind Power exercises the 3-year extension with a 24-month opt-out.
Okay.
If they opt for 24 months to opt out, or even don't fulfill the 3-year term and then leave, the full 175 is recaptured as well as all of the deferred rent. No rent is deferred unless they execute a 3-year extension and then execute another 3-year extension on the end of that. So this is a 6.25 payoff. I didn't apply any interest because I didn't have the time with my cell phone. So, it's nearly all captured. I did some number crunching, and this is where the term comes from. This represents over the 6-year term, if only would be forgiven, the forgiven rent is 26 cents a square foot over that 6-year period of time. So if you want to look at it in that standpoint, you're taking it from $4.90 down to $4.54. Did I do that math right? King of numbers. But anyway, it represents 26 cents a square foot over that 6-year period of time. So what you're doing is you're securing, we had discussions about whether a little lower rent or higher rent and forgiveness and those types of things. So the approach that we took, and again, this is only what staff did, and we're presenting it to you here for your consideration, ultimately for consideration for the Jobs Development Authority for final approval. It preserves a higher rent moving forward. And then if in fact they stay a full 6 years, the concession is given. Again, I use I use a loan number of $40,000 annual salary, and I know the number's higher than that, so I wanted to be conservative. That's $300 million of payroll on a monthly basis. Over that 6-year period of time, if they would preserve, 900 positions, and again, the $40,000 per year is a low number, that's $260 million worth of payroll over that 6-year period of time. So I think we can all agree the contributions that LM Wind Power makes in the community. The COVID has hit, all of them, and the situation at LM is widely known. So the Growth Fund and the JDA has been very supportive. As Ms. Richards indicated, they've always paid their rent. I have no personal concerns of LM, even prior to acquisition of GE or a company owned by GE, making good on their payments should they agree to make those payments. So I think this is securing a long-term tenant, a very quality tenant for our community that has significantly raised the bar in terms of payroll and benefits in the manufacturing community. So anyway, happy to answer any more questions, but that's just a little bit of a thought process that Ms. Richards and I, along with our discussions with the company, the process we went through.
And I'm sorry if I didn't make clear that we were talking about 2 3-year renewals here, because yes, nothing happens in terms of them being either removed of any responsibility to pay for that fit-up cost or the rent forgiveness unless they've agreed to stay for basically
Thank you.
6 months, or 6 years, excuse me, less that opt-out period in the 6th year.
Mr. Wolf, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Mr. Lund, Ms. Richards. So,
Thank you, Keith. Councilman Kwame, does that answer your question too? Okay, great. Any further discussion or comments from committee members?
I'll move forward, Mr. Holt.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Weigel. Is there a second?
So moved.
Second by Mr. Wolf. Final comments? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay. Item number 8 on the agenda, CARES Act EDA funding update. Ms. Richards.
We were invited by EDA to submit a grant request for $1.39 million in CARES Act funding to establish a new revolving loan fund to assist businesses who had been impacted by COVID, as well as that $1.39 million for the actual capitalization. We could also request up to $139,000 in additional money for staffing. We have submitted that request, and while we haven't been told that we will be getting awarded those funds, it is looking very likely. We're kind of expecting EDA to announce that here any day now. So that's very good news. Once we do get that official announcement, we will be coming back to this group with, we have to provide a full-blown plan for this revolving loan fund, but I did want to give you some background on some of the preliminary elements of that loan fund that we included in the grant application. So again, as I said, I'm going to say 1.4 million for round numbers. The submission to EDA was that this would be looked at as kind of a gap financing. You know, there's the PPP and EIDL, and Bank of North Dakota has put together some loan programs, but this would be for businesses that would be considered, you know, viable, but perhaps unable to meet those underwriting requirements that are out there for the existing programs, and so it would be that, you know, unmet need. We were looking at starting with a maximum loan amount of $25,000, depending on demand. That could go up to maybe a second tranche of $50,000 as a maximum per business. EDA was quite adamant that this had to be a loan, so while we could include deferrals and have a very attractive, you know, basically 1% interest rate, this was not to be considered a forgivable loan. And the good news is every dollar that we expend towards a loan program before the 2-year period of expenditure is up, we get to recapture all of those funds from loan payments and revolve them locally. We don't, what I'm saying in a very awkward fashion is we get to keep the loan payments, we don't have to return them to EDA. Anything we don't loan out in that first 2-year period does have to go back to EDA. So it's all very positive. It's not official yet, but I think it will be soon, and then when it is, we will come back to this group with an actual plan that talks about exactly how we will stand this program up. But, you know, obviously the need is there, so we're going to want to do this quickly. Certainly welcome any comments, especially Mr. Wolf from the lending community. We're hoping that this will be a program that will be marketed somewhat by commercial lenders, and that if you turn somebody down, you have a place to refer them to. But that's kind of the niche that we're hoping to fill is we're not just giving away money that we don't expect to get repaid, but we recognize that these will be riskier loans because we're only going to see the people that haven't been able to get everything that they needed through PPP, EIDL, BND's COVID funds, and so we're hoping to stand this up as quickly as possible.
So would that be a requirement of the applicants, is that they've exhausted all other opportunities before coming in front of you for that, or is that, well, I'm just wondering if we're going to have people coming straight to you for that?
We're going to look for, the current EDA RLF requires a turn down letter, as you know, so we're looking for something that maybe not that formal, but something that says, you know, we have unmet needs and that's why we're coming to you.
Yeah, I would say thanks for the update, Ms. Richards, and do look forward to learning more. There are unmet needs in our community, and such a program that you're talking about, I think, would be helpful for this region. So, thank you.
We hope so.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from committee members? No action needed on this item, correct?
Correct. Just
Okay.
information.
Hearing none, we'll move on to the heaviest agenda item, future meeting time discussion. Ms. Richards.
There seems to be some support for continuing to broadcast these meetings. To do that, we need to meet in council chambers. And your standard meeting date is third Monday before city council. And as you know, we have a hard time necessarily knowing exactly when these meetings will end. So meeting before council might not be the best thing. So I wanted to kind of take the temperature of the group on perhaps moving to, instead of the third Monday, the third Tuesday. We kind of started doing this on council night as a convenience to the city council members. You'd be in the building anyway. You could just flow from one to the other. But it would be kind of difficult for us to make sure that we could get out of this space in time for council on a regular basis. So just wanted to kind of throw that out there. Maybe for the July meeting, we could look at a Tuesday at 4 o'clock. Or again, you know, the 4 o'clock time was as a convenience to council people to proceed that. We could certainly have noon meetings or meet at 5 o'clock or 7 o'clock or 7 a.m. But 4 o'clock has kind of been a standard time. So I just want to kind of get some feedback on what sounds good to the members in terms of moving forward.
I was just about to thank you for not posing 7 a.m. as an option, and then you said it after all. But
take that option off the table, please.
I'll just speak for myself in terms of my calendar. I'm fine with another day of the week. This time, 4:30 seems to work the best for me. Noon would also be an option, but it doesn't, as long as I can get a bunch of them on my calendar sooner rather than later, that's the most important part for me, and preferably not 7 a.m.
Chris, I know you've got
I get up early, so 7 would be fine, but I'll respect, I get that's a hard time for, I'd ask the question, I'm open to doing something. I think it's got to work for the JDA. I'm thinking logically, what we do, making recommendations, needs to go to the JDA, so we need to do it in a fashion to where we meet before them at some point so they can act on it. I'd defer to maybe thoughts on council, current or future, and how a different day would work for them from their busy schedules. Myself, I'm open to doing it Monday, the same Monday lunch, if that would work, or even earlier in the day, but I'd defer to, maybe there's thoughts by council members on how they'd feel about different times.
Mr. Hall?
Yeah, go ahead.
If I may, again, Dana Sandy speaking. So, just point of opinion, tonight's agenda was about as busy an agenda as I've seen on the growth fund in a few years. And it's still only 5:10 with the meeting starting at 4. So from my point of view, again, being purely selfish and knowing that I like to attend these as often in person as possible, keeping the same schedule and knowing that the council meeting might start a little bit late, I don't think anyone on the council is going to have an issue with that. So I, for one, would prefer to keep the same schedule, but I'm just one person, so that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sandy. Anybody else?
I'd agree with what Dana and Sandy said.
Okay.
Just keeping it the same. Are we running into issues where do we need, if it starts at 3:30, if there's a longer agenda, is that an option if we know that we're going to have a bunch of things?
Well, typically, we kind of juggle between it. In the past, it has been the first Monday at 4 o'clock for a long agenda, 4:30 for a shorter agenda. So yes, if we moved our standard meeting time up to 3 o'clock, we wouldn't have any issues with, bleeding into city council. But there's a little less of that convenience factor. If our meeting ends at 4, then do you come to City Hall and then go home for an hour and a half? So it's...
How often are we pushing back city council meetings?
Well,
We don't. My experience is we go fast at the end of the agenda for the growth fund. If you need to get up here by 5:30, we'll cram in 3 items in 5 minutes.
I think, Vice Chair, I think we should, to Dana Sandy's point, maybe if we can go at 4 o'clock, and thankfully, we've had longer agenda the last few meetings, which is good, right?
good.
Even in tough COVID times, at least people are trying to work things out. So I think if we could go at 4 o'clock, and if there's just a couple items, we know it's going to be like 15 minutes, we should be smart enough to know that. So if you're agreeable that we could meet at 4, and I think what we've had is it's been a little bit at the end where the clock has been running out and we've run things through and it didn't really feel that great.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing, your chairman's not on this call, but Mr. Weber has wanted more policy discussion and, how do we, stir the economic pot and what are we here for? We haven't gotten to those conversations. And so I think if we start at 4, we could start having, as opposed just to running through the agenda, I think there was some sense of, let's have some conversations of why are we here?
Sure.
Other than to approve or not approve agenda items or modify. So if you're willing to do that and the council, if you guys are willing to defer to city council member wishes, we do that a lot. I think that'd be great.
As we move to this kind of hybrid meeting, we don't want to either make the Growth Fund Committee feel rushed or City Council feel delayed because, as you know, we often go right up until 1 minute before council. And so if you're down in the basement, it's a little easier to have council start. But if that's the goal, we can.
The times that I can remember where we've really run into rushing at the end have been a couple of times, 2 or 3 in the past 2 years that I've been on this committee. It's not, and usually, am I incorrect in saying those are usually 4:30 meetings?
I couldn't say.
Is the answer here just to make it standard 4 o'clock all the time, regardless of the size of the agenda, and then we'll have, we'll always have an hour and 20 minutes?
If that's the wishes of the group, we can operate under that assumption.
I suppose we always reserve the right to change this at any time, right?
Exactly.
We can try this,
if it
and in
becomes
2 months be like, well, that was a bad idea.
We can move to a Tuesday, but...
So why don't we keep it for now and move it at the same days, 4 o'clock.
Start at 4 and see how it goes.
If we're annoyed 2 months from now, then we'll have the same discussion again.
We'll see how Tuesdays look. Very good.
Maybe one more thing, Vice Chair Holt.
Sure.
We're in the city council arrangement, which is kind of awkward to have meetings like this. The best thing would be we'd be on the floor here and we'd have the screen and we'd have a U shape, but Maybe we can still do that, it just takes some meeting. It would be better for us to be in a round than have to, we'd have better conversations. So I think that was our hope with the Growth Fund Committee, that we'd be able to televise, we'd get in a U shape on the floor here, and we'd have more conversations than, speaking up to the dais. But maybe we can do that if we can start forward. We just need to have our maintenance folks have some logistics and be able to set aside some time to reorientate ourselves too. If you're good with this arrangement, that's good, but I think even a better arrangement would be having in a U shape on the floor, and it'd be more conversational than speaking up to you.
I agree with that.
And we can certainly tailor the meetings to the agenda items as far as that goes too. So.
Okay.
All right.
Anything else for the good of the order? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Wolf. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Stockler. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Mayor, Brandon's on paternity for the rest of the week. Can you set up something next week? Can I get Spencer? No, just,
Yeah, it's all right.
Great.
No rush.
So should I reach out to Spencer? Yeah. You want to do that?
Hey.
You talk to Spencer, figure out what we need. Supposed to go.
We're not.
We've got.